Greetings. It's Monday, October the 27th, in the very eventful, infernal year of 2025. I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, on the road, and this is the Monday Morning Report. It's getting cold. Yeah, that time of year again when the sun starts to spend less time in the sky and the moon spends more. Such is the way of things. But the way of things are not very good. They're not going a very good way these days. The big story, of course, is the U.S. federal government is shut down. And in spite of all the people saying that's good, that's wonderful, that's great, well, it's not. Very few people really understand how the United States functions. Namely, the people who live in it and are its citizens. Forget all the illegals, that's a different issue. But we're coming up on a month where the federal government's been shut down, and there are all sorts of interesting things that are happening that are potentially quite dangerous. Now, the big thing on everyone's mind here in the Beltway area, and I'm not exactly in the Beltway area this morning, but I'm in touch with people, and I'll be going down there a little later today. Air traffic controllers are overworked. They're not being paid. They're calling in sick, a lot of them. And that's not a good thing. Have you ever met air traffic controllers or seen how they operate? That's a pretty hard job. That requires a great deal of mental fortitude, stress of an enormous amount they have to endure. They also have to think three-dimensionally in a two-dimensional environment. That's not easy to do. But let me go into some of the dangers that we're dealing with here. In the Washington, D.C. area, there are three major airports. One, they're going to be adding on in the near future to the WAS tag, which will be Manassas. There's a lot of air traffic around here. We had a disaster last year, as you recall, when a helicopter hit an airliner at DCA, Reagan National. And I'll tell you what, folks, I don't like to predict disasters, but it will not surprise me if there's a major air catastrophe in the days ahead, unless they fix things. That's not just hyperbole. That's stuff I've been hearing, is when you have people working longer than they should and doing what they do, which does require an awful lot of human intervention. AI hasn't taken over air traffic control, at least not yet. That's something to be careful of, but there's other aspects of transportation we'll go to in a second. The other thing too, and this is what most people don't get, when you shut down the federal government, it costs a fortune to restart it. So you're not saving money. If anything, you're going to be spending an awful lot more than you should. Who's at fault? Well, the whole system is now inhabited by men and women who are less than honorable. Look at the incomes of the people in Congress. Come on. You can't say there's not a lot of corruption going on there. But the person you do have to blame this on is not Trump. Everything he does, the leftist, Marxist, Democrat, socialist, whatever you want to call them, is going to mess him up. I mean, he doesn't have any part in the debate. He's sitting at his, well, now he's off in the Far East taking some visit out there, but this is up to Congress to figure out. This is what their job is, and they're not doing it. Of course, they have no problem with money, and they have no problem with health care or making ends meet like the rest of us. The one individual, though, I think is vying for his position of being the number one evil man in America is Chuck Schumer. That guy, yeah, just look at him. Just look at him. Listen to him. Tell me that guy doesn't have something in him that is less than good. I think he's a very evil man, frankly. And that and all the leadership of the Democrats, they want chaos in this country. They really do, because they think that will give them the chance to really crack down and control everything, which is what they're after. They are not the Democrats of John F. Kennedy or Harry Truman or even Franklin Roosevelt. These are very, very different creatures. Republicans have their own problems and are messed up in different ways. Namely, that they would rather be right than in power at times in history. But no, they want chaos, and they want us at each other's throats, which leads me to the next thing that is being affected by this, and this is something called food stamps, SNAP, which is actually short for the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. Now, a lot of people have been online talking about how they're going to start robbing people or shoplifting and what have you. That's possible. That goes on anywhere. Ask anyone in California. But the time to deal with this issue is not when Congress is not in session, when members of Congress are not in town and they're not debating it and discussing it. A bit of background, the food stamp supplemental nutritional program started originally in 1939. It lasted for a few years into World War II. And then it was restarted again, I believe it was 1960-61 for a couple of years as a trial to see how it would work. And the program we have now has been in effect since 1964. And there's been some amendments and changes to it over the years, but it's pretty much been part of the staple. In fact, it's been around longer than Medicare. And nobody's talking about getting rid of Medicare or Medicaid. But the problem with this is that nobody is looking to solve the problem. They just want to make it worse. Now, call me foolish, but every time in history when you cut off food supplies to any population, no matter whether you think of them as parasites or whether they're really needy or if they're fraudulent or whatever, when you cut off food, no matter how bad or well-intentioned the program is, it causes problems, crime, suffering, misery. Is there fraud that goes on in that program? Yes, but this is not the way to deal with it. Just cutting it all off, seeing what happens. You don't think the Democrats know that that's going to cause a problem for a lot of the people that have been supporting them forever? No. This is by design. They want us to start arguing about this. The place to deal with this issue is on the floor of the House of Representatives and the Senate, not on social media where people are just saying, good, they deserve it. Doesn't work that way. Oh, what fools these mortals be. Anyways, the other factor is Section 8 housing, which is another issue, and I've worked in security. And I've actually had to patrol and enforce the law and the rules in Section 8 housing, and I can tell you it's not the best part of town. But the other thing you got to remember about that is most of the places that run Section 8 housing are very large corporations that do it purely for the money. It's a complicated program where people get free housing in the United States, and it's not very efficient. But the people that make most of the money are very large absentee corporate landlords. I worked one property in Virginia, and the owners of that property were out in California. And it was mostly Section 8. And I doubt anyone from that operation ever showed up. So are they going to be throwing people out immediately? Probably not, because they're not going to be able to find a better replacement. So that's not as big a crisis as the SNAP will be. But they're probably going to be getting interest on back rent and all sorts of fun stuff. So again, the money is not going to the people that usually need it with such things. It goes right back into the pockets of the corporate interests, just like the military. Whenever we give foreign aid to a country, most of that money does come back, at least in some cases, in the form of weapons purchases, which of course makes the world a much safer and nicer place. Okay. Now, let's go back to transportation for a second. If you've lived in areas where there's a great deal of, shall we say, sanctuary activity on the part of local governments, or states where if you're an illegal, if you're an invader, which is what you are, You're not an undocumented resident. You are an invader. You're a felon. You're a criminal. And the people who run the country think that, well, it's okay to give them a driver's license. Or in some cases, much more dangerous, a trucking license. Now, I've been in touch with people in the trucking industry about this, and they say the amount of fraud going on is just rampant. People who don't speak English go in and they have little cameras on them and earphones, and they get the answers to the test. They kind of know how to drive a truck, but there's been so much death and destruction on the part of illegals in many cases who come to this country, get hired by trucking companies, and go out and cause accidents. That's a daily occurrence in this country, not like what it used to be. I got into a little bit of a tiff with someone when we were talking about this, and they said, well, we have domestic people have accidents. And I said, nowhere near as many. Please stop that liberal garbage. Oh, boy. Well, let me tell you, the highways are now far more dangerous. One, we have people who have come here illegally that are still here. Despite all the efforts of ICE, it's going to take a long time to get rid of a lot of people that are here, especially the criminal element, especially the stupid ones. These are the ones that couldn't make it in their home country that have come here in many cases. These are people that have driver's licenses for regular cars, and I have seen many accidents in the Washington, D.C. area, which is just inundated with such people. But you also have now trucks, massive, sometimes very dangerous cargoes like gasoline or other types of toxic chemicals barreling down the highway. Sometimes the drivers are distracted. The one case in California recently, there was a accident, killed 4 people at least, and the driver was from India, didn't speak English, got his license fraudulently, and some stupid company hired him, which should be, people there should be punished. And he was also on drugs. They didn't say what kind, but any drug when you're behind the wheel of a vehicle is a bad idea. And there are still people in the liberal elite that think this is a good idea to have such people in this country. See, we're on a collision course, and you're seeing the demise of the United States because you can't function like this. But if you're on the highways, practical advice, look behind you a lot. And if you see a truck barreling down at you, get out of the way, because that's the number one apparently fatal problem, is truck drivers that don't hit the brakes quick enough, slamming into a tiny little car that can't escape. The highway to avoid in the Northeast is Interstate 81, which doesn't have any tolls on it. As a result, a lot of trucks use it. And I have driven on that road a fair amount quite recently. And I can say firsthand that I have had very close calls with trucks barreling down the road from drivers that really they didn't seem to understand the rules of the road. So be careful, people. And just remember, it wasn't the people that wanted to keep out illegals that are responsible for the death and mayhem that's currently happening on our roads. Okay, what else is going on here? Well, oh yes, Malavi, I believe his name is pronounced, in New York, the guy who's going to be elected the full-bore communist, he's going to win. I'm making that prediction, as is everyone else. It's going to be pretty hard to miss at this point. I do like Mr. Curtis Sliwa. He's a fine young man. Not really young, he's older than I am, I shouldn't. Actually got a chance to talk to him once. A real solid New Yorker, but New York is set to become the People's Republic of New York. And there's plenty of material out there on what he's planning to do. Basically nationalizing, if that's the term to use, all the supermarkets, taxing all the rich. New York City is going to cease to exist as a business center when he wins. People are going to flee, but it's not just New York, it's Chicago, it's Los Angeles, California itself is going to be taxing everything, and I'm going to go into all that right now. The tax the rich never stops with the rich. It always goes on to the people that really don't have a lot of money. And the US, this has happened a few times. Back in the 1970s, Jimmy Carter, cursed be his name, he had come up with a system of taxing Americans overseas, which I didn't know because I wasn't living at the time overseas, but I knew people that were, that said if you played by the rules, you would have to pay 125% of your income in tax. It was that messed up. Of course, no one did that, but we have people in government that come up with fiscal policies that couldn't balance a checkbook. And we're going to be seeing an awful lot more of that. And you're going to see taxation that's going to start with, quote unquote, the wealthy, who are just going to flee the country and put their money in the Cayman Islands or Switzerland or something. And they're going to go after everybody. And this will, if it continues, this will lead to the downfall of the United States. A lot of people talk about the French Revolution, which followed the American Revolution. That was brought on by insane taxation, but also massive regulation. I remember a presentation where I saw a set of books this wide in French, and they were the regulations for making cloth. Of course, the regulations were there to keep small people from making cloth, and if you had violated any of these maybe 1 million words of regulations in making cloth, you'd be, thrown into prison, or your property would be confiscated. At some point, humans say enough and they fight back. But the people that usually push humans into that corner have miscalculated as to how they'll fight back or whether or not they'll even win. I predict that you are going to be seeing massive taxation increasing at the state level throughout the country. Trump is really, the people behind him are just a temporary stop to this crazy communist socialist agenda which has been building for decades. And the powers that be are doing everything they can to get rid of him and to stop him. Look at what we're facing with the White House ballroom. I'm sorry, that was a damn good idea. That's 100 years overdue. Has he ever been to the White House? I think I talked about this in an earlier video. That's a great idea. It's been needed for a long time. So you break up the East Wing, so what? The White House has been gutted. Back in the 1950s, Harry Truman literally gutted the guts of the thing. There was nothing there but a shell, and the entire inside was completely rebuilt. People were upset about that, thinking, oh, these were the floors that Abraham Lincoln walked on. Yeah, until Harry Truman's piano on the second floor had a leg that went through the ceiling and said, yeah, we got to do something about this. That's where the Truman balcony, which a lot of people thought was an abomination too, but is there and is now part of the history of that building that's been constantly renovated. There's nothing wrong with it. It's actually a pretty smart idea. And I look forward to seeing what it's going to look like when it's completed. This leads me to conclude with something that is partially at the root of all the economic problems which are making everything worse. And that is artificial intelligence. Now, I'm not going to go into too much of it now. That's a special unto itself, and I'm going to be producing that in a few days. But AI is destroying jobs in just about every profession you can think of, including medical, including law enforcement, including legal. Humans have to do something. And when you have this perfect storm of the government shutdown, massive taxation, and fewer jobs that are being obliterated, I'm not talking about bottom of the barrel burger flipping jobs, although they have robots they're planning to implement there. I'm talking about white collar jobs. where you're crunching numbers, where you're doing analysis. They're going to have computers doing that, and they're already doing it. AI is the worst thing we've done. Worse than nuclear weapons. We've only had 2 nuclear weapons set off over human populations. AI has already gone off, and the fallout is just being felt. So, what are we to do? Well, the first thing is to not just point your finger at blame, because there's plenty of that to go around. The most important thing is to realize what's going on, and the U.S. appears to be dying. And I hate saying that, but it does appear to be not so much on the decline, but maybe about to enter intensive care. You cannot have corrupt people, and that's what most of Congress is, corrupt, running things, and expect there to be a good outcome, because such people are not patriots. They only care about money. They only care about power. They don't care about anything else. And if you only care about money and power, your country comes a very distant second, if not third or fourth. So, like any other time of crisis, take an inventory of what you have physically and up here. Get to know who your neighbors are, and embrace those who are assets in your life and cut off those who aren't. That includes relatives. A lot of us have relatives that have really just not understood what blood means. You have to take inventory and just get ready for what's ahead, which is going to be a very difficult time. But don't follow anyone who is going to be telling you basically what the future is for certain, because no one knows. Is it possible the U.S. could pull out of this and be great again? Yeah, it's possible. But you can't make battle plans that are rooted in hope. You have to look at what is realistically obtainable. Right now we have local law enforcement fighting the feds, especially over illegal immigration. Most of the time people are just trying to fix blame and sit at home, eat the salty snacks and drink the beer and scream at their television sets or their computer screens for the most part. We don't need people who are waking up. We need people who have woken up and are getting out of bed right now, putting on their boots and are ready to go out and do something. Best thing you can do is to be aware of what's going on, know your neighbors, know your friends, and more important, know your enemies. Don't give in to the narrative, because that's what they want. You see, none of this is by accident. This is all by design. The crisis the United States is in right now is by design of people who are devoid of morality, and I would have to say devoid of goodness. Such people do exist. They don't live, they exist. Be wary of them. That's it for today. If you appreciate my work, please like, subscribe, and share. Share with your friends and share with your enemies, and hope they're not really enemies, because we need as many friends as we can get these days. I can be reached at feedback@aureliancolumn.com. That's feedback@aureliancolumn.com. I'm up on X. My handle there is MICCAMPEN. That's MICCAMPEN. This podcast originates at Substack. My handle there is aureliancolumn.substack.com and is available at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and elsewhere such media is accessed. And please consider a paid subscription or a donation. It is needed these days, especially as I travel. Hard times are everywhere. Until we meet again, be good, be safe, be vigilant, And remember, clown world, the deep state, and all those who wish to destroy our civilization must themselves be destroyed. Good day.